In this video, I want to give an example of how using the object-oriented approach can make some tasks much easier in Python. So let me start with an approach we've already seen, and this is fine for some simple tasks, but again, like what I was saying with regards to matplotlib, once you want to do something more sophisticated, then you'll be happier if you're using an object-oriented approach. So let me show you, I think, the more basic way that is not object-oriented to start. So let me import OS. Okay, but both OS and pathlib are part of the standard library in Python, so you don't need to install either of these. And here I can say os.listdir. So this is a function, this list directory, that is defined in the OS module. And so what this does is it lists all of the different files and folders inside of this path here on my computer. And it's not so obvious how to decide like which of these are files as opposed to which of them are folders. For example, is this license, is that a file or is it a folder? Is this images, a file or a folder? So it's really not clear, and we don't have much access to check immediately from this output, because these things here, like this license, that's just a string. Okay, so let me go ahead and save this. I'll call it, how about my list? And let's go through and let's just check type of X for X in my list. So these are all strings, and so they're not going to have any special methods associated to the fact that they're actually describing some specific file or folder on my computer. And so this way, this OS way, I don't see a good way to use that to decide which of these refer to files and which refer to folders. So let me show you the object-oriented version of this. And this has been around in Python only relatively recently. I think it first showed up, I heard, in Python 3.4. And right now we're on something like Python 3.10. Okay, so we're going to say from pathlib import path. And so this is like importing an object, okay, an object of type path. That is how I think about it. If we look at the help for path, okay, it's called a class. Okay, in class, this is the way you define a new type of object in Python, is with this syntax class, space, and then the name of the object that you want to define. And so let me copy this path up here. And let me say p, that would be my variable name, equals path. And then I give it the same input that I gave to this list dir. But you shouldn't think of this path as a function, really. You should think of this path as an object, and then when we're doing this, we are instantiating one of these path objects. And unlike when we instantiated the random number generator here we gave it no arguments. In this case, where we're instantiating this path object, here we are giving it an argument. We're telling it where to look for the path. Okay, and if we were to check what's the type of this variable p, it's POSIX path. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And so very similarly to os.listdir, here we can do p.iter for iterate or iterable dir. And so this gives some generator object, but if I just want to see what's in there, I can convert it to a list. And so this really holds the same information as above, but it holds it in a much more convenient way. For example, we had this week 1 and this license up above. And here we have this week 1, here we have this license. And so if all I want to do is iterate through this, as opposed to displaying it here, there's no reason to convert it to a list first. So let me say, how about x.name for x in p.iterdir? Okay, iterate the directory. And this gives maybe the exact same output as the list dir from operating system or from OS up above. But let's check what the type is of each of these x's. So these are probably strings, these x.names. Let's check what the type is of x. And I see I gained some extra brackets. Let me get rid of those. So these things, these x's, they are also POSIX paths, just like p was. And so the fact that they're a path as opposed to a string, that gives me all sorts of extra methods associated to them. So for example, I can say x.isFile. I hope I remember right that it has an underscore. And so this tells me for each of them, is it a file or not? Or if I just want to see what are the files, I can say x for x in this directory if x is a file. When you're starting out with programming, you might be tempted to say like equals equals true, but there's really no reason to do that. This is already true or false, and so doing equals equals true is not going to add anything. So it looks like there were 7 files inside of that particular folder that we passed to path when we created the path. Okay, so I hope that was one example of how the object-oriented approach, where we have these special path objects, as opposed to maybe a more functional approach, where we just have a bunch of strings, how using the object-oriented approach made like tasks we wanted to do, follow-up tasks, much more manageable. The object-oriented approach made those follow-up tasks, like checking, is it a file, made that much more manageable.